My name is JT Van Zant. I'm a fly fishing guide on the Gulf Coast of Texas. Being on the water has always been the secret to unlocking my soul. I just feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing in this life. And that feeling inspires deep thought and conversations with my clients, who are all of varied backgrounds. I truly enjoy sharing perspective on the human experience with folks I take fishing. Drifting, a YETI Presents podcast, was created with the goal of capturing those candid conversations with people who inspire me and sharing them with an audience that has the same sort of restlessness and curiosity that I do. I have found that the best way to provide wisdom and hope for future generations is to learn from the folks that have blazed the trail before us and have made tough decisions in the pursuit of living an extraordinary life. I hope you enjoy, and thanks for listening to Drifting. Shep Gordon. How do I even get started about this guy? You guys wouldn't believe me even if I told you. It all starts when Janis Joplin gave him a black eye back in the 60s. Then his serendipitous rise to success ever since seems endless and without boundaries. The saying at Shep's house in Maui goes, if you haven't met your hero yet, then hang around to the next meal and they'll show up. The reach of his broad success across the music, film, and culinary arts is unparalleled. When you meet this guy, you're in his flock. His kind and open soul draws you in. It's really hard to get Shep to take credit for anything, but here we discuss his long relationship with the Alice Cooper Band, how he single-handedly created the celebrity chef, how he became close friends with the Dalai Lama, and despite having dated some of the most beautiful women on the planet, how true love has been elusive. But like Shep told me, I've found it easy to love everyone, but difficult to love just one person. Hey Shep, thanks for having us over to your beautiful spot, buddy.
Aloha, nice to have you here.
Thank you. So, I've always known about you, but having the opportunity to come over, I dug a little deeper, and it's just, how does a kid from Queens end up cooking for the Dalai Lama and everything in between? It seems like whatever you've shown an interest in, you've had a major impact on that industry.
Thank you. Hard for me to look at it through that lens because it leads to all sorts of weird stuff. But I feel very lucky, very blessed. I think if I have one takeaway from it all is be bold in trying to get mentors. Be really work at trying to get mentors in a very honest way. I found that my approach to all of them has been basically the same. If I found someone that I thought I really wanted to be around, that really had a kind of energy that was living a life that I wanted to live and didn't know a roadmap of how to do it, I would just be honest about it, and try and add something to their lives that was important, but at the same time be really honest about why I was doing it. And I think it's a great life lesson anyway, to try and make people happy.
Just be humble.
Be humble, be real, and add something. I always used to think of Johnny Appleseed dropping his apple tree seeds, and I think as a human you can go through life dropping your seeds. If you look at every interaction and everything not from a selfish place, but from how can I make this person's life better? How can I make this tree's life better? How can I make this piece of lumber's life better? It just leads you to a nicer place and you're happier. And for me, happy is really, I don't know how to define it, but I know when I feel it. And,
was that passed on by your folks? Were you always like that?
No,
Were you a popular kid, or did you get picked on?
No, I was a complete loner as a kid. I spent a lot of time alone. I have no idea. My life to me is a knee-jerk reaction. When Mike Myers did the movie, he kept talking about cause and effect, that good cinema is cause and effect, and that he wanted to perceive. And I really, after watching the movie, I could make up the story that there was cause and effect. But for me, everything was pretty much random. I think my father was a very gentle, beautiful man. And he dealt with the world in just a beautiful way. He was an accountant, never made a lot of money, didn't have access to stuff, but he just was a beautiful, beautiful human being. And peaceful at the core. And I always wanted to be more like him than I was. I came out of revolutionary period, drug period, greed period. You know, I'm a child of the 60s. We all wanted to own the world. We all wanted to cure every problem in the world. There wasn't a lot of slow time. So my search was, how do I be successful and be more like my father?
Did you go in with those sensitivities to college and choose sociology with that idea, like
no,
with that
really
compassion for humanity?
I had, right before you guys came, a friend of mine came whose son is starting USC tomorrow, and those were, whenever I'm interviewed, I say those were the best years of my life, because it was when I found out who I sort of was. Until I went to college, there was no me. There was a young kid who reacted to his parents but I never had to deal with who am I. And college started that journey, and I think to this day I still don't know who I am, but I see the choices that I made. And I like the choices I made, and I can build a story backwards. But there was no real story going forward. I woke up and I did what I did, and I went to sleep.
How did you operate with such an intense moral compass without that knowledge of self in place?
You know, I have no idea, but I know that my motivation never was just economic. That was just intrinsic to me. And I have very self-worth, always a big issue in my life. So I don't know where the moral compass came from. I don't know if it was that I didn't want to be hated by people. So I tried to do the right thing so they would like me, because I didn't have much self-worth. I don't know what started the story, but I'm really happy.
This is incredible, because it's so opposite. Like you meet the most beautiful woman in the world, and the next thing you know, she's like on your arm for the next 3 years. But you're telling us like no confidence. I don't know what I'm doing. Oh man. So did you choose sociology from the beginning, or did you just kind of
I took sociology because I said you didn't have to take classes. I basically got through school dealing marijuana to my teachers. It was right at the time when drugs were starting to become prevalent. And it was there was a sort of a meeting point of liberal education, social political revolution. Berkeley was the leader of it in California. Buffalo considered themselves the Berkeley of the East. And I went the first year, was a state school, so it was very cheap. And we had a bunch of New York social liberal people there. And
did you even get grades, or was it just
they in some of the courses they eliminate? I talked to actually one of my friends who's still a friend, Marty Kriegel, I spoke to this morning. He taught 3 courses to give you an idea what education was then. He taught 3 courses in the philosophy department: something, nothing, and anything. This is for real. These were each 3-credit courses. Something, you brought a record. And you sat on the floor and you had a record player, and each class you'd play a record and then talk about the record. Anything, you brought more than 1 record. And nothing, you brought nothing, and you sat in silence for the whole class. And those were 3 credits each. And that was cool.
Those weren't on my class list.
Yeah. So I found basically teachers who were starting to smoke cannabis, and I would go to Mexico once or twice a year and bring it back and give them, and I never went to classes. And sociology is where you could do that.
Did you ever get busted? It was pretty strict laws back then.
No, never got busted. Came way too close too many times, but it never got busted. So I was really lucky. I came really close. I remember one time I'd come back from Mexico, and I was sitting in my apartment with a Buffalo Evening News newspaper, and in those days it was a very different world. So a lot of times you would buy grass and people would put sugar water in it to weigh it down. So a pound really wasn't a pound. So this I had gotten taken. So I got back at that sugar water, and the cure was baking it in the oven. Not to the point of burning, but to get rid of it. So I had just baked it. I had it on my lap, a kilo, 2.2 pounds. And a cop walks in my apartment. I lived on Main Street in Buffalo.
From the smell of bacon?
No. He says, "One of you guys got that car outside? You got to move it."
Holy cow.
"No problem, officer."
On our way.
But I don't think in those days they even knew what it was. You know, this is 65, 64. It was a completely different world.
It's like a vape pen now.
It's like a vape pen now, yeah. Thank God for vape pens.
Did you know you were on your way to LA before you got out of college?
No. I went to, again, everything for me is sort of random. So I got out of college. I went to the New School for Social Research, which had just started in New York, the night school, and worked in a place called Divine Garments that my cousin owned, which made clothes for funerals. No backs. So people get buried in suits and their dresses, but it has no back. So the fitting, they don't have to get fitted. So every customer I had cried. Everyone, because they were always buying stuff for someone who had died. Or I'd have to make emergency runs to a funeral home because it didn't fit. And they're getting ready to show the body. I said, "This is a little rough." And the California Probation Department came to the New School for Social Research to recruit. And there was a song on the air, "Put a Flower in Your Hair, I'm Going to San Francisco." Great song. And I said, wow, California. And I thought about it, and it was the Reagan era. And they were being really tough on hippies. So I figured a lot of them were in jail. And here I had a chance to go out and be a probation officer and help out the kid, my contemporaries who were in jail, at least have somebody who was sympathetic to them. So I took the job, and that's how I got to California, Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall.
Were you living in that hotel, the famous
hotel? I was
hotel?
staying on my friend's apartment floor, and right off Sunset Boulevard. A guy named Richard Lawrence, who I had gone to Buffalo with, and he had come out to produce a TV show. And I stayed on his floor. I had about a month and a half till the job started. I sold the Free Press right in front of Greenblatt's on Sunset Boulevard. And I would get fed at Griffith Park. They did a free feeding every day in Griffith Park. And then I started work. It lasted one day.
I was thinking it was like a month or two. It was the first day you were like, I'm out of here?
It was a one-day affair. Yeah.
What happened? Did some kid on probation?
I went in, it was mostly Latin. I spoke Spanish from my days of Acapulco going to and Mexico to get the smoke. So I could tell that the other guys, I was a long hair, and the other probation guys did not like me. But they said my first job was to take the kids out to play softball, monitor it. So when we get out there, I realized there's nobody else but me and all these kids. And I had given them a little talking to when we came that, I was cool, everything was going to be good now. I was going to make their lives easier. And the next thing I know, they're all around me with the baseball bats. But they could have hurt me, but they didn't really hurt me. And after about 2 or 3 minutes, the other guards came out, but they let me be alone there for a while. And I said, I guess you guys don't want me here. And they said, no, we don't like your kind here. So I left. I worked one day.
And then you got punched out by Janis Joplin, thinking you were helping her.
Checked into a motel just because it was cheap, and you didn't have to put first and last month or anything. And turned out that it was the motel with Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix, and everybody was staying. And that started my journey. I never intended to be a music manager. Jimi Hendrix said, "You Jewish?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "You should be a manager." Sure.
That's unreal.
Let's go be a manager.
Helped you with the logo. Alice Cooper comes in, you lay some grass on him,
Right.
and y'all are off and running.
Off and running.
That's when the really just seemed like the things you started doing for him. And you weren't even a big fan of that type of music,
No,
right?
still not.
It was kind of terrible to you. But these outlandish stunts that you came up with really had never been tried before in the entertainment industry.
I
they all worked.
I get a lot of credit for it.
Yeah.
But I can't say it. I think back of there were guys like Lord Buckley, who used to come out in a coffin. That was the way you started his show. I think what was unique with Alice and I was, Alice says it better than I do. He said, we met on a lie. I told him I was a singer. He told me he was a manager. So I don't know if either of us really had full faith that we could make it on the music. It just didn't. It wasn't music that This wasn't the Doors. He wasn't the greatest singer in the world. They weren't the greatest musicians. The songs were really weird. People would walk out on the show. But I didn't come to it as a music manager, and he didn't really come to it as a rock and roll guy. He was the same as me. They were in a high school track team. They had to put on a skit. They put on Beatles wigs, and all of a sudden they could get girls. Let's be a band. And that's really how they started.
All that stuff was customized for the needs of that particular band.
For that thing. So when we sat down, we said, how are we going to make it? Because it wasn't like we had other choices. I didn't have a job. He didn't have a job. We want to eat. We have no money. We get thrown together. And it's, let's figure out if we can make this work. So rather than approach it musically, we approached it, I as a sociologist, said, let's look at this from, who were the people who made it really big? The ones who made it really big were the ones that the parents told the kids, don't go see them. That was the Beatles. That was the Rolling Stones. I remember as a kid getting around the TV for Elvis Presley on the Ed Sullivan Show because they announced that they wouldn't show his hip action. That was the most disgusting thing in the world. They weren't going to show it. And that made Elvis go through the roof. So I said, it seems to me that the acts that are really big, the thing they have in common is that parents hate them. So, fuck the music. Let's just get parents to hate us. That I know how to do. We know how to do that really well. So that was our mindset starting. When it started really working, the next conversation was, holy shit, now these people are going to come see us. What are we going to do?
We got to back it up.
Yeah,
now.
holy shit. And again, I don't think any of us wanted to just rely on the music, because although we wouldn't look each other in the eye and say it at that time, I don't think any of us thought that it was powerful enough musically to get...
Even Alice, he had doubts about his own ability.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we were young kids just trying to buy lunch.
Did he have a chance without you? Without that serendipitous encounter?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. But you never know. But so what we did is we introduced theater with music, because that way we could tell a story. We could do things that didn't have to be just a great guitar lead, because that's what the world was in those days, and we didn't have a great guitar lead. So we came up with a classic morality play that's always worked throughout time. It still exists in I went to Bali a few years ago. I went to up in the mountains to a village. They did exactly Alice's show. It was wild, even with the makeup, which is wild. But every single culture has a morality play that they teach their children, which is one person in the village goes crazy, turns into a horrible person. It manifests like in Bali in a dance of 30 people. One person's dressed in black with a mask. He starts freaking out. And they perpetrate these horrible things to their community. And then the community rises up and kills the person who in their community went crazy. And then that person is reborn again. And that's Alice's show.
Yeah.
He chops up baby dolls. He does horrible things. He gets taken. He gets guillotined or electrocuted or hung. And then he comes back in white for School's Out in just a beautiful way. So we got lucky, you know. And then he started to actually develop into what I feel is a great songwriter and a great performer.
Like with School's Out and I'm 18.
Yeah, School's Out with gimmick records to a point, but when he started to get to The Only Women Bleeds and to the Lost in Americas, and really, really poignant, beautiful. His lyrics were always a reflection of society. They were always mirrored it, and really, and he's become a great entertainer, which I don't think he was back in the 70s.
Evolved.
Yeah.
On course. That's awesome. And y'all made this pact like, we're sticking this out till we both become millionaires.
Absolutely.
I love that. I wish I had put that pact in place at some time in my life. But
and that was our journey. It wasn't to make the best music. It wasn't to get the most. That was really our journey.
And you love soul music.
That was my personal taste.
Since childhood, since coming.
Yeah, that was always my taste. I used to be one of those guys who would sing in the shower and do the dance steps. And
Was your course with Alice so remarkable that other artists took note and you became a thing, or did you still have to
it
chase
started
them down?
really early because it was so unusual and it was so big so fast. 72, he was the biggest biggest touring artist in the world. There's a really good book about 72. It was The Who, the Stones, Zeppelin, and Alice.
Wow.
But we did the business. We were the leader. So it got so big so fast. And the things we did were so unique. Because once we knew what we had to, once we had this thought, I ran into Diana Ross's son. We watched this clip of Alice and Diana Ross co-hosting the American Music Awards, where he goes insane and starts to beat her up. And the police come and grab him, and he kills a couple of the policemen. This is on.
Holy smokes!
This is on national TV.
Yeah,
on an award show.
I bet a bunch of people believed it was really happening.
Oh no! Believe me, yeah, it was wild. But that's what we did at every occasion. We did whatever we could do to piss off parents at every turn. So it got amazing reaction. The first random call I got was Raquel Welch.
We were just talking about her, of our dream women from childhood.
Yeah, she said, I remember her line. She said, "Are you that freak? Are you the freak who made Alice Cooper famous?" And I said, "I don't know about the freak or made him famous, but Shep." And she said, "You're taking me to the Academy Awards tomorrow." And there I was at the Academy Awards. We get out of the car and her dress falls off. It was a pink chiffon dress.
What luck!
And she turns around to me and says, "My back just broke. You have to hold it." And I remember my arm, my knuckles were so white, the amount of sweat on my body holding Raquel Welch. I think I was 22.
How old was she?
I would say Raquel was 40-ish,
Wow.
maybe 35, maybe 30, 35.
It's more than the right place, the right time. These things that are happening to you. This is not.
I have a great
this
picture
is not
in
normal.
here. I have a great picture somewhere in the house that Bo Graham sent me from Newsweek magazine. There's a picture of me holding her dress, and it says "unnamed escort" with Raquel Welch. I was the unnamed escort.
And you start to show up everywhere. When you started getting artists that you respected more musically, that were in the genre you preferred, did your work get easier based on their natural vocal talent?
No.
And you had to reinvent what was needed for those particular artists. That's a good manager, right?
Yeah. I think
there's no playbook to it.
I was just going to say there's no playbook. There's some managers are really great at making money. Irving Azoff is brilliant. He's a manager in the business, and he's just brilliant. He knows how to really monetize an artist's career, and that's really what gets him off. That was never my thing. What got me off was not having to use your last name. Alice who, Raquel, Teddy, Luther. And there's a lot of artists that didn't need what I do. I think, the Billy Joels of life who are they sit at a piano That's all they have to do. You know, they don't have to piss off parents. They don't have to do anything. They just have that gift. So where I fit in was the someone who had some success and wanted to make sure they maintained it. And the key to that for me was trying to figure out what their connection to their audience was and how I can really define that. How do I clear it? So, you know, in the case of like a Teddy Pendergrass, it was for women-only concerts. He was about pure sex. How do you really define, how do you tell that to an audience without, you can't say, no, you're going to love him, Teddy's sexy. That's so arrogant, you lose all your sexiness. So how do you define that without being arrogant? And it manifested in for women-only concerts, where we only let women in. And we gave out chocolate teddy bear lollipops for them to lick on, you know, during the, lick them all over, and just make it really as, you know, sexy as we could, and get the point across that there's, you know, a black artist in your town tonight playing to 5,000 black and white women who just want to fuck his brains out. And that brings everyone else in to look in and say, what the hell is going on? And it defines him as what he is. So you know when you're looking in what to look for.
Were there men just stacked up around the outside of the arena trying to standing on each other's shoulders? The
ones who were most pissed were the people in Teddy's life. Lawyers, record companies. You're going to ruin his career. We're going to get civil rights lawsuits. We're going to get equal. You can't just limit it. You know, you get that a lot from, you know, traditional people if you try and go outside the curve. And then with Luther, who, you know, on paper would look to be very much like Teddy, was completely different because he was about romance, where Teddy was sex. Luther was completely romance. So how do you do that? And what we ended up doing was contest on the biggest radio stations in the country, get married by Luther live on the radio. So we did weddings on the biggest stations. Romance is nothing more than a wedding. So that was what I tried to do, you know, that on the biggest thing, then manifested all the way down. But I would try and do that for each artist. Gypsy Kings were, you know,
they were amazing.
Just a party, you know.
Yeah. You're working around the clock.
No, I worked
Plenty
hard.
of time to party,
yeah.
but
No, I worked hard. I definitely worked hard.
First to show up, last to leave.
Yeah, but I was so lucky. I mean, the lifestyle it afforded me and the access to, you know.
What an amazing early life, right?
Yeah, so lucky. Yeah, so lucky. So I worked really hard, but I think it was easier for me to work hard than to try and find a life for myself because of all my sort of issues, and I always had women issues, so it just was easy to work.
Women issues, too many beautiful women?
No, just like, you know, real relationships.
Yeah.
Not the fuzzy kind of stuff.
Sure. No, I understand that.
You know, I spent a lot of, although it looked great from the outside, I spent a lot of nights having dinner alone. You know, there wasn't, I for whatever reason, it just was easier for me to keep working than deal with whatever my own issues were.
Yeah.
That was stopping me from my dream, because I always wanted to have kids. And, you know, my fantasy, if I had 5 minutes and I'd think about who I wanted to be, it was, you know, have some kids, have a nice wife. But it was much easier to just keep working
the wheels
than try and figure that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you know Matt Sweeney, my buddy, before he played you in Supermensch?
Yeah. I met him afterwards. That's right. When you said Matt Sweeney, I was trying to think of his name.
He's a great guitar player, but he's...
Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah.
He's maybe even a better Shep Gordon.
That was an amazing experience.
I paused that on the reenactment with you and Teddy when you were signing and you were saying, I'm gonna party harder than you and be standing.
Yeah, no, that was a very...
And you need me. And
that was really a funny...
Like,
I love Teddy.
So
Teddy
perfect.
was my... You know, Alice is like an arm. Teddy was my brother. We shared so many of the same likes and dislikes. Alice and I have very different lives. Our personal lives are very, very about as far apart as you could possibly get lives. we meet at a place of compassion for every human and happy lives. He's very Christian, and he brings those really good Christian stuff that, you know, religion is supposed to give you.
Yeah.
Respect for every human being. I've never heard him raise his voice. Never heard him curse ever. I mean, that's 50 years.
Wow.
Pretty well. Even as an alcoholic, I've never seen him be disrespectful to anybody. So we meet there. But in terms of how we spend our time away from work, other than golf, we're completely different. Teddy and I were the same person.
And he was always willing to work. He always showed up to whatever you lined up for him. There was no like having to go wake him up. He was. He wanted it.
Oh yeah.
And that makes you want to work for him.
Oh yeah. No, Alice is the best. Alice
you didn't mess around with deadbeats.
He's never dropped the ball in 50 years, and I can toss him 20 balls at a time.
That's super great to
he's
hear
amazing.
that about his character.
We have this really funny thing because I'll write the show, and I'll know there's something missing. And I just know it. You know when you're writing something that's just... And I'll tell him what the show is, and I know he doesn't understand one word I've said to him, but he puts in the missing piece every time. This is for 50 years. It's the weirdest thing.
What a special relationship.
Yeah, it's really wild.
Both of you guys are so fortunate to have each other.
And we know it. I mean, we are very appreciative of each other.
Where does he spend most of his time?
He's working all the time. He loves work. He lives in Phoenix. Does a radio show 6 nights a week. It's a 5-hour radio show. 102 stations here and syndicated around the world. Takes him about 45 minutes a show.
Does he like the golf courses around Phoenix?
Plays golf course. That's why he's in Phoenix. Plays golf every day.
Troon and
he's amazing. He's in the middle of the tour. I just saw him at the Greek Theater. Sold out, 5,500 people. Had a great time. Gets in the bus afterwards. Moves to the next city. Does 120, 130 shows a year.
Let me ask, and I hope it's not too painful in memory, but when Teddy skipped that show and in the movie you described the urgency at which you believed he should go on, and he refused, and you said, this is going to turn around and bite you so hard, so fast. And he got hurt and paralyzed. Did you believe in that karma? Did you associate those two actions?
Yeah, I didn't think it would happen that fast. Never thought it would happen that fast.
But that's 100% real for you, that the trueness and realness of karma.
I wasn't there that night, so this was on the phone. And the guy who worked for me, who was on the road with him, after he saw the movie, said to me that he did have a cold, but he didn't think that's why he didn't play, but that he did have a cold.
Just had a roadblock of some kind and wouldn't budge.
He just wouldn't. I've had that with him a couple of times, and I try and do my thing, and then I backed off him. It happened at the Apollo. We had 2 shows at the Apollo, sold out. He wouldn't get on stage for the second show. He went home, and they wouldn't tell me for years why. I mean, literally, it was years.
Yeah.
And it was because he saw a gun in the audience. And what I didn't know is that his last manager had been shot to death, and it freaked him out.
Justified fear that he had.
Yeah. Yeah, but he didn't tell me for years. It was like years later one night we were drinking cognac. And he said, hey, man, I'm really sorry what I did to you that night. I said, hey. And he said, I never told you why, because I felt like a small guy, but I want you to know that. And,
I went from being a fan of yours to caring about your story in the part where Alice describes that you would always look those hotels up that you busted out of to run from the tab, and then you would always send them a check.
Absolutely. You got to pay them back. You do what you have to do to get through life, but it doesn't mean you always do what you want to do.
Not a free pass.
Yeah. And
that was long before your attraction to Buddhism. Is that correct?
Yeah.
You didn't even really know that was coming towards you?
Didn't. It started. My attraction to Buddhism. I'm not a Buddhist. Not a practicing Buddhist at all, but I went to... My first trip with Mr. Verger was to Bangkok. Oh, no, this is before Mr. Verger. I got a trip. Alice toured Europe. The travel agent gave me a present going to Bangkok, to Pattaya Beach in Thailand. And he had like 4 girls meet me at the airport. This is before the Me Too revolution. And this is what Thailand was sort of famous for. And they took me to some hotel somewhere. And in the drawer was a Tibetan book of prayer or something, and instead of a Bible. And I read it, and it really read some of it, and it sort of resounded to me. And I came back, and I have a friend named Marty, who I talked about before, Marty Kriegel, who knows everything in the world. And I said, tell me about Buddhism. I'm really curious. And he sent me this beautiful, like 8-page tryst on Buddhism. And he ended it by saying, now forget everything I've told you. Your walks on the beach every morning are the essence of Buddhism. And it always stuck in my brain that I'd love to learn more. And then when I was lucky enough to get taken to see His Holiness and got to be in the room with him, when he walked in the room, it was like I had taken the best shower of my life. I had had that feeling once before when Mr. Verger walked in the room, but never that strong. It was just like, whoa. He just cleaned everything in me. And I didn't touch him. I didn't talk to him. He just walked in the room. And that really got me curious. And then the journey sort of began. And I still feel sort of that way when I'm around him.
Well, I love, too, the yak tea. And he's like, that's why I left Tibet. Get that stinking shit out of here.
You ever smell yak?
I haven't.
Oh, my God. I'm sure Kimmy has.
The boiling fat, right? It's
but it smells like a locker room.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just horrendous.
And the interest in food, that you'd reached success with Alice and your other artists, and I imagine you were eating and living a life that you'd never experienced as a young man.
Yeah, till I met Mr. Verger, I wasn't really an eater.
Okay.
I still was like a macaroni and ketchup guy. That was my joy. I'd finish my work. It'd be like 11 o'clock. I'd smoke a joint, make a big bowl of macaroni and ketchup, and sit in the bed just gouging myself. And I was pretty big. If you see pictures, I go up and down. So there were times I got to 230, 240.
You were svelte, and then you got pretty big and back to svelte. And
so that was pretty much, my replacement for a personal life, was sort of gouging myself on food. And then when I met Mr. Verger.
Where was that?
That was in the south of France after the Cannes Film Festival at his restaurant called the Moulin des Mougins. And he was gracious enough to let me sort of intrude on his life. And his language was the culinary arts. So I had to learn it. If I was going to learn from him, I had to learn his language. So that got me started. And as I got into it more and more, I became more and more impressed with the artistry and how similar it was to the music business, except that nobody was monetizing it. But so similar. I mean, Mr. Verger had to always write new recipes. Artists have to always write new songs. If Mr. Verger didn't serve zucchini flour, his clients would go crazy. If the Stones didn't play Brown Sugar, they would go crazy. Mick Jagger comes to the show in his dungarees. Mr. Verger goes to the restaurant in his dungarees. Jagger changes clothes. Mr. Verger changes clothes into his whites. Jagger's backstage giving notes. Hey, man, the lights fucked up last night. I need to dip. The sound on the guitar wasn't good. Verger's in the back going, too much butter, too much this. And then Jagger goes on stage and it's all smiles, and Mr. Verger walks out into the restaurant and it's all smiles.
And you picked up on that inequality.
Yeah, but they couldn't send their kids to private school, and they were treated like
couldn't
real
sit down
shit.
and eat.
Couldn't sit down and eat.
Treated like the help.
Treated like real help. And I really
Superstars.
learned. I got this amazing respect for them as artists, and an art form where by 1990, 92, 93, I started to realize that service was what made me happy. And then all of a sudden I reach a class of artists whose entire job is to make people happy. That's the essence of a great cook, is make someone happy. So it resonated with me so strongly that this was the culmination of all the things I sort of believed in. Being a hard worker, being great at your craft, being compassionate, being of service. And I realized that my job skills from what I had done were the perfect match for these guys.
To me, too, that proved it wasn't a coincidence or some fluke that you had reached success, because you turned around and put the same golden touch.
Because it was the same principles.
And invented the celebrity chef,
yeah, it was the same principles. It was exactly the same principles.
A new generation might not even know that becoming a good cook isn't associated with fame.
Right, at all.
These days.
It's so changed so much.
And there was a lot of hard living and a lot of self-deprecation in culinary world, smoking cigarettes, drinking too much.
Horrible.
A thankless sort of existence, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think nowadays kids want to cook to become famous. That had nothing to do with it. These guys really were passionate about service, about making people feel good. And I remember the first time at the Moulin, one of the things that was most impressive to me was they brought the dishes, and every dish had a cover. And they uncovered the dishes at the same time. I said, wow, the equality in that is so beautiful. I'm so used to being in a restaurant where the person paying the check gets served first, or the woman gets served first, which I never understood. And here was everybody getting served at the same time. There was no, first, last, significant, not significant.
The discipline, especially in the French.
Yeah. And that equality. That
never showing the back of your arm to someone, always from the front.
Yeah, all that stuff. So I was very impressed. So, yeah,
and you rocked out a new world for them. You carved out a new place for them to exist.
I found my passion. Music, never my thing. Movies were never my thing.
You skipped over your movie career.
Yeah, never my thing at all. But when I started the culinary arts, I found what really made me happy. Like, my happiest days are going in and cooking 5-6 hours at the stove. That's my happiest, and that's my meditation. That's up until a couple of years ago, I didn't even have a stereo in the house. Rick Rubin came here, and he wanted to play me a tape, and I said, I don't have anything. So he bought me Sonos for the house.
That's amazing. When you first had a dish when you were hanging out with Verger, how mind-blowing was that? The tastes and
the taste just blew me away. And his compassion and his caring about people. And the sourcing from humans. He knew the face of the guy who brought his cheese. He knew the face of the person who grew the lettuce. It was so human. I was so used to a clinical approach to commerce. Just trucks press the records and go to a store where a clerk doesn't give a shit. And he was this beautiful experience of,
the respect that those animals, those plants deserve. That
really beautiful
presentation, amazing. Where'd you go to culinary school?
I didn't. No.
I thought when you were with Verger.
No. He sent me. He told me. I said to him, "What do I need to do to hang out with you?" And he said, "Can you cook?" And I said, "No." And I said, "How do I learn?" So he wrote down 2 cooking schools, and I went to Marcella Hansen in Italy for 2 days, and Charlie in Bangkok for 3 days.
And then I came back and I
said, I did it.
Incredible. Are there any...
Great mango we're eating, by the way.
I'll have another. Thanks, buddy. Thanks, Shep. Scotty? Are there artists to this day that you wish you'd worked with, that you had an opportunity to?
There was one artist that only ever tried to sign one artist. Everybody else came to me, and it was important for me that they came to me. Very hard to do what I do, selling yourself. It's so outside the box. And the ideas I think of are so crazy that I really needed someone to come to me. And but the only one, when I was just about to leave the chef world, I knew I was going to. It was actually working. They were all so new at making money that philanthropy wasn't on the radar screen. When I say philanthropy, educated philanthropy, not just giving money or doing a benefit, but figuring how to have the culinary arts be more than self-serving. And I felt like if I didn't get that into the fabric, this thing was going to come and go fast. They didn't need a reason to be, other than them making money. And a kid popped up in England, Jamie Oliver. And I read about this TV.
Love his books.
Oh, best cookbooks in the world. But I read about this thing he was doing. He was opening a restaurant that he had gotten the BBC to fund a 13-part TV series of him opening a restaurant with all ex-cons or not college graduates who had never cooked in their lives, that he was going to train and open a Michelin-starred restaurant with. I said, holy shit, that is the cool, that's a use of the culinary arts. Well, I called up Alice and I said, would you come to London with me? I'm trying to sign this guy. I told him the story. And I said, I don't think he's going to care who I am, but if you're with me, I know I'm going to get his attention. So I booked in the opening night. Alice and I flew to London, and we went to the restaurant opening night. And he came over to the table, and I introduced myself, and he had heard of me from America. And I said, I'd love to talk to you. And he ended up coming to Hawaii with a couple of his people. And he was very, he said, listen, I really want to do this in-house. I have my own staff, and we have a very strong focus on what we're doing. And so I didn't sign him, but he's the only one I ever went after. And he had a huge impact on the culinary world. And now it's much more part of the fabric. Where people are, I've been seeing some fantastic things like these. They just opened in Kansas City with the help of some of the better chefs in Kansas City, a homeless feeding center where you make a reservation, you get a menu.
Yeah, it's a French chef that's fronting that, isn't it? He's looking for, an Italian chef.
An Italian chef.
Who's looking for host cities around the world that will participate in this.
You get dignity.
Right.
Homeless are families. So
that's part of the mission
bring your
statement.
Kids.
Yeah.
You get a menu. You get served. You have actual dignity. I mean, it's so beautiful. Almost makes me cry every time I think about it.
It's sourced from food that would otherwise be thrown away.
Yeah.
Right?
No,
it's so awesome you brought that up.
It's such a great, but that's happening all around. There's a pizza place in Philadelphia. A guy who was a stockbroker. There's a great little video on it. And he saw this concept in New York called dollar pizza, where it's $1 a slice. So he quit his job and he opened this dollar pizza place. And one day a homeless guy came in, and there was someone else in the store. When the homeless person came in, the person in the store said, I'll buy him a slice. Let me buy him a slice. They gave him this idea, and he put up a bulletin board, just stickies, and a little sign saying, if you want to buy someone hungry a piece of pizza, give me $1 and put the sticker on the bulletin board, and they come in and take it off. He did in the first 3 months like 100,000 pieces of pizza. He gets his whole $1, so it's made his business successful. The person giving it, the interviews with them is that how good they feel that they can actually for $1 feed somebody. To hear these people like one, and then he has these beautiful. The video ended with a beautiful thing of a guy coming in. He said, "I recognize you. Do you come in a lot?" He said, "I used to be homeless. I came in every day. Now I have a job." And he put the $1 up on the board for someone else. So it's starting to be something other than cooking $100 dinners for rich people. There's really a consciousness seeping into it, which is really cool.
Do you feel connected in some way, responsible?
No, but I'm really proud to see it happening.
But I've got a theory. I mean, prior to your involvement and determination to make chefs regarded as the superstars that they are, before that, a person might not even be interested in that life because they know they're not going to get paid, they're not going to get respect. So opening up the celebrity chef world.
Yeah. No, I'm very proud of that.
Mushroomed into all the possibilities we see today.
I'm very proud of that, and I realize I had a big effect on that, good and bad, because a lot of them now are doing it for fame rather than.
Cheers to you on that.
But I am really thrilled to see guys step up and use that platform to feed hungry people. because that's really what it's about. That is what it's about.
And I go back and forth between being hyper optimistic and totally cynical about the world and my own life. I believe that everybody is willing and wants to participate, but you just get so caught up in your day-to-day grind and you don't know the right outlet. And when my dad was a musician outside the music business, and I remember we had really made it when he bought this shitty old houseboat, and it was when your good friend Willie Nelson and Merle Haggard turned his song Poncho and Lefty into a #1 country hit in 1985.
That's your dad's song?
Yes, sir.
Wow.
And so we marched along. We kept the same Oldsmobile. We still had the power getting turned off. And my dad, he was a huge influence on me. He was an amazing man, but I can't figure out whether he shunned success intentionally to keep his writing pure. That was his excuse. Right. But when he died, I saw the fear in his eyes and all the regret from not having accomplished that. Right. And then it crossed my mind in a conversation with Matthew Johnson, who owns Fat Possum Records, and I thought, what if he had ever really gotten a good manager? What if someone recognized in him the talent and took him on that journey to success? Because he's a very pure source of good songs, and he earned the respect of his peers. And he always said that he'd be more famous after death than he would be while he was alive. But I don't buy that shit anymore.
No, I think there's so, I can't, impossible to give an answer.
I'm wishing he'd run into you, but you probably wouldn't have dealt with it.
I think a very common thing, particularly for songwriters, because there's something so lonely about songwriting that really, you have to get into your box and really go so deep to get a good song, at least from what I've seen of real songs. But it's sort of like I was talking about, easier for me to work than look for a life, because looking for a life scared me.
Yeah.
I think that's a very common thing with songwriters. There's so many who profess to want to step into the spotlight, but are scared to death that if they do, it's going to ruin their songwriting ability, because they're going to change, they're going to morph. Songwriting, I'm sure you know better than I could. Yeah, your dad. It's a pretty lonely thing.
Yeah, he was always on the outside, watching and hoping to define how a community or an individual or a couple in love acted, but he could never participate in that and have that third-person observer. Yeah.
So it's not uncommon. I know. So I managed one songwriter, Cara Bear Singer, and after about 2 or 3 years, I just sat down with her. I said, "The last thing you want is fame. So what are we doing this?" But she wanted, in her brain, she wanted to be famous. But I think she had a big fear that she would lose the edge on her songwriting. So each one different. Not knowing your dad, I can't tell. And you never know, you never know what combinations are going to work or not work.
He was very much also like, I believe he went on a date or two with Janis.
Did he really?
Oh my God. And wrote a song called "You Are Not Needed Now" after she died.
Yeah. About him?
About her. It's a very beautiful, touching song.
Because she would be, right after sex, she would be definitely, "You're not needed now."
Yeah, adios. Get the fuck out of here.
That would definitely be her category.
How long did you keep proximity with Jimmy and Janis?
No, the movie makes it seem like they were my best friends.
Yeah.
It was really fleeting moments. The one that I got really friendly with was the Chambers Brothers. And that relationship still to today is carried on. Janis was on the road a lot and always on the hunt, always had a buzz, very little interaction. Jimmy, shortly after this whole this time that I spent with him, went to London. So he was sort of out of it. Morrison definitely stayed friendly with, because I was the only guy who drove. I had a 54 Cadillac limousine. So I would drive the guys home at night when they were drunk. So we had
What an
I
amazing.
guess I can tell the story.
Amazing.
He's dead, but the other guy isn't, so I won't put the names in. But there was a girl, if you're out there, Kathy, aloha. There was a girl who was the door lady at the Whiskey A Go-Go. Catherine James. Catherine Starfucker is her name in the legend. Fairly famous, gorgeous. Like stunning, beautiful. And she had a studio apartment, all painted white. It was during the blow-up days, that movie Blow Up with the white. And there were 3 pop stars that I used to drive over to her place. And the first one I took and walked in, for a big picture of them on the wall. That's the only thing on the wall. Then maybe 2 months later, a British pop star was in town and asked me if I could take. We were all at the Rainbow, and it's the same address. We pull up, and fuck, I better wait around, because when that door opens and he sees the picture of the other guy, door opens, there's a picture of him. And then I took Juvie over, and it was a picture of him.
Amazing.
She was good.
There was a little closet right there full of framed photographs. Oh my God. How about Willie? How close are you guys? Is he
I
over
love
here all the
Willie.
time? You all
Yeah, I
twisting
love
him
Willie.
up, burning it down right here in this awesome
I love
spot?
Willie. We were the 2 first really in Maui. Well, not really. That's not true. First was Jim, TV star. Jim Neighbors.
Oh yeah.
He was sort of the first that I know of from the Hollywood community. Him and Carol Burnett, they were the first sort of. And then Willie and I came in. I came in at 74. I think Willie was 76. And we've been friends ever since. I produced Red-Headed Stranger for him.
I knew that. So you saw the little town of Luck, Texas, and Spicewood, right?
Yeah.
And see, like Willie and Waylon and all those guys, that defined the cowboy era I grew up in.
Unbelievable.
There was no association with hatred and meanness and willful ignorance about the world. It was a beautiful, compassionate thing. Cowboys rode bulls, but they also birthed calves. They had total sensitivity towards nature, towards the environment.
Oh, it's amazing.
It's just flipped on its freaking ear right now. But I got married at Luck, my first
Did you
time.
really?
Yeah, my first really poor decision.
They got billed with the money
Willie
from
if I
Red-Headed
could-
Stranger.
If I could use it, and I don't know if you've heard of the Bells of Joy. It's a gospel group in Texas.
No.
Bunch of black guys, and the youngest member at the time had been with the band for 43 years.
They played?
Right, and I asked him, this was kind of coming down to the wire, so I'm like, Willie, can I use Luck to get married? A little chapel, I'll clean the whole town. And I was out there for 3 days in rubber boots with a big shop broom, just pushing dust out of every building.
He's coming back today, Willie.
Is he? Awesome.
Yeah, because we were on the flight yesterday that got canceled.
I've seen him.
The morning
I haven't
flight.
seen him in a long time.
So I jumped on a Delta flight in the afternoon, and Woody was on the flight, which is really funny.
That's so awesome. You guys just always
But Willie's
running
back
into
this
each
morning.
other.
It's a very tight community here.
Yeah,
really tight.
Willie's like, can I use the town? He said, no problem. So I got it all ready.
That is really
the band
funny.
brought a preacher. My wife's mother thought the whole thing was just terribly, horribly ugly and ridiculous. And all my friends thought it was amazing. And about a year and a half later, it ended, and I went back out to Luck just to hang out in the main clubhouse and burn one with the guys and play some pool or some checkers or
Up at
something.
the house, yeah.
And there was no one there, so I was about to leave, and out behind the bar, there's a window, looks over towards a chicken coop. And Willie was sitting there cross-legged, his hat on, and his hand was sort of cocked over with a big old blimp in it, like usual. And he had a big 5-gallon bucket full of golf balls.
Oh, yeah.
And he was throwing one by one into the chicken coop, and the chickens would chase it and peck at it. He was laughing his ass off all by himself, stoned to the bone. So I went and told him it didn't work out. He didn't seem too surprised.
Yeah, they built that town for a Red-Headed Stranger.
Yeah, that's super awesome. But yeah, one of my heroes. One
I
of
never
good
knew.
buddies. I was always reverent and thankful he covered my old man's song and kind of put him somewhat on the map.
No, that's very. He's a really good man.
I had a long time.
He's another one of those guys who never has a bad thought. Never. He just
keeps it on the sunny
keeps
side.
it on the sunny side.
I'd cruise around back then, especially after divorce, and picture the things I was doing and the things I knew about fishing and traveling and just always thinking if the right woman could see me in my environment, see me right now, she would have no choice but to love me with all her heart. And that doesn't fall out of the sky,
Yeah.
you know, and I didn't date beautiful women, just the few that I loved, and that it fell apart. Until now, I have an amazing wife who
I was just going to ask if
absolutely
someone,
lucked out into, and it took me 10 years to realize she was the one. She was dating someone else. I literally went to her door and got on a knee, and she slammed the door on me. I managed to push my foot into the door and barge my way in and try to convince her, and it worked. And we got married, and we have 2 boys. But
congratulations.
you're somebody, thank you, sir. You're somebody who, like, I mean, you walk into a palace and Sharon Stone's there, y'all date for 3 years. You go to a Playboy mansion party and take all your clothes off, and you leave with a centerfold and marry her. Like, what?
I just went to the house that we were living in. I was in LA last week, and I got invited to a launch party for a gin. And I was about to say no, and then I noticed it was my address, which was so bizarre to go back to the house. Wow. It was a blur. I only lived there like 90 days.
I just wonder, you know, having faced all my insecurities, or at least the ones I'm aware of, I'm sure there's a pile of them I haven't come across yet. But I would always maybe get that date, and then by the time I knew her and kind of dump everything on her, then it was kind of over. And it always felt like I was too open-hearted and shared too much of my weaknesses with women. Maybe they didn't want to hear that shit.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they just wanted a confident man who kicked ass when he left the door, you know, and came home sweet enough to tolerate. Like, I saw a lot of macho guys who I didn't despise them, but I didn't respect them,
Mm-hmm.
really land quality women and provide that safety. I never got it. I was never told about women. I didn't have siblings that were, I just had to figure it all out, and luckily found one that could literally help me get along. And she told Scott via text just yesterday, he was kind enough to let me read this sort of candid conversation between the two. And she realizes I'm her 3rd child and what her role in my life is. So I'm super fortunate. Never met anyone in preparing to talk to you that doesn't think you're the sweetest man, the most giving man, the most thoughtful, genuinely honest, caring person they've ever met. And with all that opportunity, I just wonder, just for my own knowledge, if that same insecurity, if how I described it is something that's affected you. You could be such a badass in your field and come home and have self-doubts about who you are.
Yeah, I don't, you know, self-worth was always a big issue in my life. Still is. There's a part of me that realizes that I've been really lucky and really had a full life and accomplished a lot, but there's still that child part of self-worth. I can't give a speech if I get up in front of an audience and I'm wearing like a green shirt that's black within 30 seconds.
You're nervous in front of a crowd?
Oh my God, the sweat.
I would not guess that.
Oh my God, like stay up for the whole night before I don't do it anymore, because I'm just, I get so nervous. First time I had to talk for the Dalai Lama, I wore a green suit, and I know how nervous I'm, so I never do anything. And I had to do a thing in New York, and when I got off stage, literally the armpits of the green suit were black.
Just dying up
oh
there.
My God, it was like, I never wore anything but black again when I went on the stage. So I don't know where, you know, I sort of embrace it at this point. Obviously, it's helped me go on a path that I'm really proud of, because it's a big part of me. So instead of running from it, I sort of embrace it.
It's almost like everyone you ever met is your family.
Yeah, in some way, you know, I would always say that it's really easy for me to love everybody. It's really tough for me to love one person. Loving everyone is
That's it.
Really easy.
You just put it. Right.
Yeah, loving one was always tough. So.
What are you most proud of? Would it be being the Tibet Fund directors? Being on those. You've got it. You've got acknowledgement and awards in every category you've ever.
I think seeing when I see something good come out of the kids that I helped raise, that's probably my proudest. When I see them do something that I'm proud of, which isn't often enough, guys. I think that's when I feel like maybe I actually will leave something good behind.
It's really touching. Supermensch is a great movie. Thanks to Mike Myers for putting that out.
Yeah.
For anyone who hasn't seen it or is too young to understand who Shep Gordon is, check it out. Amazing individual and American. You've had an impact.
Thank you.
Big time. Thank you, buddy, for having us over.
Thanks for coming to Maui.
Let's go have some of Kimmy's.
Yeah, ooh,
Access
how lucky are we?
line.
Oh
Totally
my God.
lucky. Thanks again, Shep.
Thank you. Mahalo.
Thanks again for listening to Drifting, presented by YETI and hosted by me, JT Van Zandt. To listen to more episodes, visit yeti.com or search Drifting on iTunes.